Kal Kadosh, Boker Or, Masechet, Bava Metzia Daf Yutet Amud Aleph 19e1. Starts the Gemara by saying as follows. We're talking about giving back the get with simanim. Okay? So the Gemara says like this. Rabbi Barachana comes and Irkas Legita be Midrasha. He lost the get in the Bet of Midrash and they found it. So Rabbi Barachana comes and he tells the Bet of Midrash. Now this is talking about that he was a shliach to take the get to the wife. So he lost it and now they found it. So he went and he said to the people of Bet Midrash, Isimana, if bemet you guys, right, if there's no siman muvhak in the eyes, itli bigaveh. I do have a siman, right? Itviat ena, if it's tviut ein, right, which means that I could actually see it and I recognize that this is the get. I also have tviut ein. So adu ani aleh. So they went and they gave it back to him, right? Which means that basically he went and he gave that the.
He had lost it before he gave it to the woman. Huh?
Yeah, obviously. If he already gave it to the woman, that's it. There's nothing more to talk about. But basically, what happens is that now he lost it. He needs it back. So he comes and he gives them. He tells them, listen, whether it's going to be a siman, right, which is not muvhak, right? I already have a siman. Right, and he gave the siman ploni. And if it's tviut ina, he also has the tviut ein. Okay, that means even without a siman. Okay, fine. So they give it back to him. Amar, he went and he said, Lo yadana imishum simana adruani ali. I don't know if they only give it back to me because of the simanim. The kasavri, now they actually held that simana doraita, which means that that's why they came and they gave it back to me, because even though, right, that means since the simanim are doraita, so therefore they give it back to me, right, which helps even for a doraita. But remember, giving a get is doraita. You're permitting a married woman to the shuk, okay, to the marketplace. Or imishum tviut ena hadurani ali, or they give it back to me because of tviut ayin, vedavka tzubem rabbanan, only a rabbi, right? Because the rabbi, he has a chazakah that he's not going to change his words, and therefore when he has a tviut ayin, they're going to give it to him. But not for anyone else. Meaning anyone else that comes and says, you know what? Yeah, I recognize it. This is a get. They're not going to believe him. If it's a rabbi has tviut ayin. Yeah? But if it's simana, it works for everybody. And it's doraita. So, but I wasn't sure what the reason was. Meaning, I don't know what the real reason was that they came and they gave it. Gufa. So they came and they said, right? Matzah get isha bashuk. If you find a get isha in the marketplace, Bizman shabal modeh, if the husband agrees that he actually divorced with it, yachzir laisha, you give it back to the woman. And if the husband does not agree, you don't give it back to her. Lo lezeh velo lezeh, not to the husband, not to the wife. Bizman shabal modeh, if the husband is going to be modeh, mia yachzir laisha, you do give it back to the woman. Velechu shema katav litem benisan velo natan tishri. This is 1 second, but maybe he only wrote it in Nisan and he only gave it in Tishri. Ve'azal abal ve'zabin peirei. Now the husband goes and he starts selling fruits, right, from Nisan until Tishri. Umapka legita de katab Nisan. They take out the get which was written in Nisan. Ve'atal mitzvah ve'ukoch, and then they're going to take from the lekuchot, and it's going to be shelo kadin. So what's going on then? How do you permit such a thing? So the Gemara says, Hani chalamandamar, this is good according to the mandamar, kivan shenatan inav legarsha, that once he wants to divorce her, shuven lebal perot shapir, so now the husband does not get any perot, it makes sense. Right? Why? Because basically what happens is that there's never going to be kilkul from here, because from Nisan until Tishri, the perot are be'emet, they belong to her. And therefore if the husband, when he sold it, it's not correct for him to sell it. So it makes sense, right, that even if he wrote it in Nisan, Kaddish, that's it. He wanted to divorce her in Nisan. He only gave it to her in Tishri, but he wanted to already divorce her in Nisan. That's when he started. So first, he doesn't get any perot. But according to the Manda Amar, yesh lebal perot ad shat netina, that there is going to be the bal perot until the time of the netina. Michael Mem, what are you going to say then? So answers the Gemara, ki atya lemitraf, right, when the woman comes to collect the perot from the lekuchot, amrina la, we are going to say, right? Bring a proof when exactly is, right? When did the get come, right, to your hands? That means basically she has to bring a proof when did it come to her hands. So that means according to this shita, we're not going to be somech on the tarikh. We're not going to rely upon the date which is on it, meaning she has to bring a proof. When is it going to happen? So it comes out that there's not going to be any suspicion from the fact that he gave it at an earlier date. So says the Gemara, Umayshna mishtarechov. What's the difference between other shtarechov? Right? The Tanam, as we learned in the Mishnah, Matzah shtarechov. If right now they come and they found a shtarchov, yeah, im yesh bein achriyu nechasim, if it's got achriyu nechasim, which means it has a lien, lo yachzir, you don't give it back to the guy, to the lender. Ve'ukimnam, we're talking about kashechev modeh, that even admits that it was here. And he admits that this is the case, and still we don't give it back. Omishum, and because Shema katav lilvo ben Nisan, ve'lo lavad tishri, is the same thing. Maybe he wrote the document to borrow the money in Nisan, but he only borrowed it in Tishri. The katarif lekuchot shelo kadin, and then he's taking from the lekuchot shelo kadin. So hatam nami, so to the same thing. Lehadar, give it back to the malve. V'chiyat lemitraf, and if he wants to collect, we could just tell him, bring a re'ayah, right? That the shtar chov, when exactly did the shtar chov come to you? Meaning, if your entire thing is bring a proof, so okay, so just bring a proof that this is when you got the document, and then that's it. Yeah? So he comes and he says, yeah, Amri. So they said as follows. Yeah, they come and they said like this. Amri, hacha gabeget isha, ati lokeach, yeah, v'tav'ah. He says, if the woman is going to come and collect the fruits from the tarikh, which is from the date which is written in the get, so then you think that the koneh is going to come and he's going to say, prove to me when you were divorced? Amar, the lokeach could say, 1 second, right? It could be right? Mishum de lo ta'gim v'tetiv. The only reason why the rabbis gave her the get is in order that she doesn't be an aguna. Hashta de ka'atya lemitraf, right? But now that she's coming to collect it, tezel v'titir raya emat mata gita liyada. You're going to come and bring a raya when the get was, and only then you're going to collect it. Hacha, meaning by the get you could actually understand such a thing, because by the get people could say, listen, you know what? Maybe it's true, this is the halakha to do with the get. The only reason why the get was any different was only just because, how do you call this? Was only just because that they didn't want her to become an aguna. So they were very lenient on it, but to do with collecting that they weren't lenient. Aval, but here, kabe shtarchov, to do the shtarchov, loti lokeach vetava. Right? They're not going to come and they're going to be tovia. Because since they're going to come, they're going to give back to the shtarchov. It's barur that why did they give it back to him? Lemitrafu, only to collect it. So shmaminat kamura bara memintav mikamedem didi mata shtar liyadeh. So it was beforehand, right, that it came. Meaning like this: by a get, people could actually think, you know what? Really, be'emet, she can't collect with this get from the beginning. But why did the rabbis give it back to her? They were lenient on her. They felt bad on her. They said, what, she's going to become an aguna for the rest of her life? So they give her the get. But to do with collecting, I could demand, when did the get come to your hand? And therefore she's not going to collect. To do the shtar chov, there's nothing else that you could do with the document other than to collect. What's a shtar chov? A shtar chov is a debt document, which you come to collect the money. So if he has a debt document, there's nothing that you're lenient because you don't want him to be an aguna, and because it doesn't exist. So what was the purpose? In order for him to collect. So therefore, if he has this debt document, it means obviously the what? It means that he actually had it before me. And therefore, that's why it's going to come out, right? As we already mentioned, that they're going to collect, right, shelo kadin, and that's why you're not going to give it back to anybody. Okay? 2 dots. 2 dots. Right? We said that if a person found an emancipation letter, which is basically a letter of shichrure avadim. Okay, so Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Braita, Matzah shtar shichrur bashuk. If you find an emancipation letter in the marketplace, Bizman sharav modeh, if the master admits that he actually freed him, yachzi levid, you give it to the slave. And arav modeh, but if he doesn't agree that he freed him, lo yachzi lo lezav lezeh, you don't give it back to anybody. Says the Gemara, Bizman sharav modeh, if the master admits, miya yachzi levid, you give it back to the slave. Why? Nechush, why don't we suspect? Shema katav liten lo benisav, tishri. Again. Right, what happened was that maybe Be'emet, it was written in Nisan, and he only freed him in Tishri. He only gave it to him in Tishri. Ve'azal avda ve'kana nechsin, and the Eved went and he purchased properties. Right, he purchased properties min Nisan ve'Tishri, from Nisan until Tishri. Ve'azal arav ve'zabnin nunu, and the master came and he's going to sell them. Right, because remember, ki'ilu, if the slave buys it, it belongs to the master. Umapikle l'shichrur dekatab b'Nisan. Then he's going to come out with this document that he was really bemet freed in Nisan. The katarif lekuchot shelo kadin, and then the slave is going to come and he's going to take from the lekuchot shelo kadin. Everyone understood what happened? One more time. The master comes and he wrote it in Nisan, but he only gave it to him Tishri. Now, in between, he went and he bought a property. So now the master comes and he sells it. So now the slave becomes free in Tishri, right? All of a sudden he comes and he says, 1 second, it's written from Nisan. He goes to the lekuchot and he takes out from the properties. He says, listen, I was freed in Nisan. Look at the document. Give me back the properties.
To the guy who bought that.
Who bought it from the master.
Miskin.
Yeah, but that's what we just asked. That's the question.
He gets his money back?
Who?
The guy who bought
He has to run after the master. So, Hani Chalamandamar, this is good according to the Mandamar that says Zechutu le'eved sheyotze mitachar rabo lecherut, that it's something good if the Eved is going to go out through the Cherut, and like Abaye, Damar Edav b'chatumav zachile, that the witnesses which are there, they are already going to be Mizakeh oto, Shapir, then it makes sense, because basically what happened was that even though he was only given over in Tishri, technically speaking, Ki'ilu, that he was already done during Nisan, because it's a Zechut for an Eved to become free. But according to the Mandamar, that it's bad for an Eved to become free. Why? Because now he's going to become prohibited for Shivcha Kenanit. So Ma'ikal Meimar, so then what are you going to say then? Right? What are you going to say? Yeah, what are you going to say? Since it's a chovah to become freed, so you're not going to say that it's just enough now with the signatures that he's going to be Zuchenet from Nisan. It's only when he actually gets the document, which is going to be in Tishri. The Chi'ati lemitraf, so answers the Gemara, because when he's going to come and collect, we're going to tell him, bring a raya, when did the shtar shichrur come to your hands? Just like we said before. Meaning, shtar chov, we tell them, bring a proof, when did you get it? Eved, bring a proof, when did you get it? A woman, we don't say that, because we could say that, they gave it to her just because of the entire concept of the not becoming an aguna. Fine, daitiki. Daitiki, remember, was the document about giving a present, right? It's a matana, right? It's a shchiv mera, giving a present. So he says, Tanu Rabbanan, we learned on right there. Daitiki. What is a daitiki? Da tehe lemekam veliot. That's the Rashi Tevot. Rashi Tevot means this is going to be, right? At tzava, it should be shrida vekayemet, which means it should be good. That's like it's a Rashi Tevot. Da tehe lemekam veliot. Daitike, right? Daitike. So he says she met that if he dies, echasav leploni, his properties go to a certain person. Matana, says the Gemara, but what's a shtar matana then? Kol shekatuv bo me'ayom ulachar mitav. It's written from today and after death, which means, right? That means the guf shel karka is going to be already from now, and then he can't sell it anymore, or he can't give it as a present, or he can't give it as nothing. That's it. But the perot are going to be only after death. Almas, you see from here. If it's written me'ayom lechamita, he's going to acquire it. But if not, he doesn't acquire it. So Abai says no. He says like this. This is what it means to say. What is a matanat bari, which is like a matanat shchiv mera? De lo kani, that you're not going to acquire it. Ela la'achar mita, until after death. Kol shekatuv me'ayom lechamita, which means if the person's healthy and he writes a shtar matana, which is written me'ayom lechamita, he doesn't acquire it until after death. Okay? And it's not going to be compared to a shchiv mera. But the shchiv mera, basically because of the scenario, we're much more lenient with his case, that we say whatever he's, you give it over like that. So Ta'ama, the reasoning is Del Amar Tnubas, he didn't say actually give it to them. Hamar Tnu, but if he did say give it over to them, we do give it to them. Or Minu, we have a contradiction, meaning if right now they found the daitaki and now he says give it to them, so therefore that's going to be the difference. So he says, or Minu, we have a contradiction. Matzah daitaki or putikot, if a person found daitaki or a shtara putikot, which is basically like a shi'abud on a certain aputiki, right? A certain property. Umatanot. Even though they both agree, we don't give it back to anybody. So here it says we don't give it back to anybody. So what are you doing? So Amar Rabbi Amma bar Ma'amel, that's not a question. Yutet Amubet. Yeah, habe bari, habe shchiv mina. It all depends whether we're talking about a bari or a shchiv mina. He says if we're talking about a bari, right? That means it was basically going to be written to do with a bari, so it's not written the normal, like the normal case of daituki, right? So therefore, that's why we're saying that it was like this way of a shtar, right? And therefore, that's what we're talking about, that even if he's modeh, we don't give it over. Because we're talking about matana bari. Matana bari, we don't give over that much. If it's matana shchimera, we do give it over. But the shchimera, again, since he's on his deathbed, we're much more lenient with this case, and we actually do come, right, and we do give it over. Okay? Matnit in diktani, our Mishnah, is like we learned, ha'amar tenu, notnin. But if you did say give it over, we do give it over. Right? B'shchimera, tebar me'darhu. So we're talking about that the shchimera, that he's, as long as he's chai, he could still retract. Meaning, a shchimera, as long as he's alive, he could still retract. But remember, the only reason why he's giving it is because he thinks he's going to die. So if he, for example, lives, everything goes back to him. He didn't give anything over because it was only on the... Meaning we already know that the only reason why he's giving it is only because of that. It's because Bemet, he wants to, he thinks that he's going to die. If he's not going to die, he's not going to give it over. Yeah? The Amninan, because we are going to say, Michael Lemema, what do you want to say? Dilma katva meikara lahai, maybe he wanted to give it to this person. V'imlich v'lo yavala, and he didn't give it to him. And then he wrote it to somebody else and he gave it to somebody else. Hashta kahadar be'me'ahu di'avenale. Maybe now he's going to be mitcharet. He's going to retract and he's not going to give it to the second person either. But if it's going to be metanat bari, rayavale, that they're going to give it to him, let lepseida, there's no loss. The chinafke tarte, right? Because when you're going to take out the two different shtarot on the beddin, patraita zacheh, the second person is going to be zuche in the matana. Tehadar be mikamaita, but he retracted from the first person. Vi matana shchiv mera. Now, if we're talking about now the matana shchiv mera, nami yavanele, you give it to him. There's also the bar pseida. There's nothing to lose. He says why? He says the batraita zache, because the last one is going to be zoche. The kahadar be mikamaita, because meaning like this, to do the tzavat shchiv mera, the last. It's, by the way, you should know the exact same thing happens today as well. The last will is the one that always takes into effect. Imagine a person comes and he writes a will, right? To dividing his properties. And all of a sudden they come and they have a later will. We always go by the last will. And the last will is exactly what happens. You understand? So it actually makes sense exactly what's happening. Because it's like the last will that's actually taking into effect.
If he wrote two?
If he wrote two, yes.
They contradict each other?
So says the Gemara, Ki katani bebraita. When do we learn in the braita, right? This entire concept that's different. If they both agree, we're not going to give it not to this one, not to this one, only in a bari, if somebody was healthy. They love bar medarhu because he cannot retract, which means a person that's healthy cannot retract from the present. A shchiv mera can retract from the present. Because remember, since he's on his deathbed, so therefore that's the only reason why he's giving it. So therefore all of a sudden if he retracts, right, so then he does give it. Was we're going to say Dilma katva lehameikara. Maybe he wrote it to this person first. Then he went and he didn't actually give it to him. And then he wrote it to somebody else. And he did give it to him. And now he retracts from the one that he actually did give it to him. And he holds that since I cannot retract, right, from giving the present to the second guy, I'm just going to say I did give it to the first guy. And therefore they're going to give him back the property, right? The meaning like the document. You understand what happened? By a matana bari, he cannot retract. So he wrote it, I'm giving everything to John Doe. At the end he went and he gave it to Mr. X. Now what happens is he regrets giving it to Mr. X. But he already wrote a document to John Doe. So now all of a sudden, they find the document, John Doe. He says, yeah, I gave it to him. Why is he going to say he gave it to him? Because he doesn't want to give it anymore to Mr. X. He prefers now John Doe than the other guy. So that's why he's preferring it. But we're going to say, right? We're not going to come and give it. Right? But maybe you're going to write this. So we have lo yavdinale. If you have to lini shachrin, they're going to give it to somebody else. Had Rabbi, vi lo yavdinale shachrin, and if they're not going to come and give it, right? He says, "Bait tetve lehai ktiv lehashta ktiva achalina." They're going to give it back. Because now if you're going to tell me now that it's going to go to another person, there's nobody that's going to lose. The kadim zacheh. Because the one that already got it first, he's already zucheh. Right? Which means that even if you're going to come and you're going to say that they're going to start lying and everything, it's always the first person that had the matana that he's the one that he gets the properties. Okay? So Matkif Laruzvid comes and he asks the following question. We said, 1 second. I thought that we're always talking about a daitiki, and the daitiki had to be a shchiv mera. Meaning the concept of a daitiki is a shchiv mera. That's a shtar shchiv mera. It's not a present. Matana was a bari. If it's a matana present, it was for a healthy person. If it's going to be a daitiki, it's talking about a shchimera, a person on his deathbed. So Elmaleh Razvid, but rather Razvid said, "B'shchimera v'lo kashia." That's not a question. Habei v'habebrei. It all depends upon him and upon his son. Meaning, we're talking about that he himself was the one that's giving over the properties, and the Braita was talking about that you don't give it back. Is talking about where it was a met mitzvah, not met mitzvah. It was met the guy that was commanding, and therefore the son came and he already inherited it. Okay, for the person that was already written for. So therefore, right now we're going to try to understand. So matnitin de kamar tenu. So our Mishnah that says give it over. So we do give it over, but the day. We're talking about he himself said it. The bar me'adaro, because he could actually retract. Meaning, this guy, since he could retract because he was the one that was going to die, and now he could retract. So if he says give it over, we actually give it over. Because we're going to say because nobody's going to lose out. Because even if he wants to give it to somebody else, he can give it to somebody else. Because the first guy, the second guy, it's always the second guy that's going to be zoche. Because you retracted from the first one. When we're talking about in the Braita, even though both of them are admitting, lo yachzi lo lezel lo lezeh, not to this one, not to that one, bibrei, in the son. Because we're going to say, dilma katav avu alahai. Maybe the father came and he wrote it to this one. Ve'imlich, and he decided not to give it to him. Right? V'lo yaven aleh. Ubatar avua, and then after the father died, katav ihu, the son went and he wrote it to somebody else. Yavele, and he gave it to him. Ve'hasha kadar be'me'ahu, now he retracts from it. So he wanted to say, I cannot retract because the son is a matana bari, is a healthy guy, so he can't retract. So Emar Lehu, I would say that he's going to now say that the father gave it to the other guy, and he actually gave it and he wrote it down, and he could take it away. He's going to be zocheh. And then he's going to divide it. Meaning this guy is going to come and divide the properties now, he's going to make a trick. Hilkach, therefore, we're going to say to him, we're not going to give this, not to this guy. To Dilma, because maybe the father wrote it. We're not going to give it to the other guy, because he's going to give it to somebody else. Now he's going to retract. If the father gave it, go write another document. But even if the father didn't write it, and now you're going to write it, that nobody's going to lose out. The kama ubatra kama zache, because even if there's a first one and last one, the first one is going to always win, and not the last one. Okay, because basically when you have two different documents, the first one is always going to be the one that's going to be zoche in the properties. So Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a Braita, matzah shovar, if you find a receipt, bizman she'isha moda yachzir labal. If the woman admits that the guy paid the ketubah, you give it back to the husband. If the woman does not admit, you don't give it back to anybody. So bizman she'isha moda miyad yachzir, you do give it back to the husband. Why? Dilma katva liten benisan velo natnan tishri. Maybe she wrote in Nisan, but she only gave it to him in Tishri. And then zavanta lektuba betuvat anami, she's going to sell her ketubah for those 6 months, and it's going. And then all of a sudden you take out the shovar, and she gets back the money. So Amar Rava comes and he answers Shemamina. We learn from here, right? Kaf Amud Aleph on the top, that Itale de Shmuel, that we hold of Shmuel. That Shmuel says if somebody is going to sell a shtar chov lechavero, and then he is going to be mochel, it is considered forgiven. Fafilu yoresh mochel, that even the yoresh could be mochel, meaning the guy could actually come and make the guy lose 100%. So you owe me $100. I come and I sell it to John Doe, and all of a sudden, right, what happens is I come and I forgive it. It's forgiven. John Doe just lost his $100 because I forgave the loan, and you owed me the money. That's Shitat Shmuel. Obviously, we'll continue with Zat Hashem tomorrow.